Hey, how you doing? Yeah, you sound good.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to BRAP. I need to figure out why we have hot mics right now on BRAP. I have the channels muted here on Streamlabs, and everyone's able to hear us, even though apparently we're muted. So I don't know what's going on. I need to figure that out. But so apologies for the hot mics. I saw it in the live chat. I think it was it was RP Game. He said hot mic. Newtonian says you sound good. Well, thank you for that, Newtonian. So. Yeah, yeah. I don't know what happened. I don't know why we're getting hot mics, but anyhow, welcome everyone to another BRAP. It's Wednesday night, and we got a lot to talk about. A lot of gaming related news, a lot of news as it relates to Microsoft's hearing with the federal judge for the FTC injunction regarding the FTC, the injunction by the FTC. And we are going to discuss some Final Fantasy 16 as well, because I'm playing that right now. So I do want to talk about that. But before we get to the topics tonight, I want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Do me a quick favor. I'm going to drop a link here in the live chat. Please retweet the link. Also, do me a favor. Smash that like button. Smash the like button. If you're new, subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. And also want to give a big shout out to the panel here. We have with us Game Logic. What is going on, Logic? I think we did we lose Game Logic? Logic, can you hear us? All right. Look, I'm not sure if Logic can hear us, but Kofi, we do have a special returning guest. We have Creative Kofi. What's going on, Kofi?
What's going on, Brad, man? It has been a wonderful week with Final Fantasy out. It has been all of my free time, minus my wonderful family, and some other great demos that I've played. So I just cannot wait to share my thoughts with the game. I think, like you, I'm not done. I'm a significant portion in, but other than that, man, just I'm slowly seeing some quote unquote revealed emails regarding Microsoft and the FTC. It's a lot. I'll be dead honest. I haven't even seen. Yeah, I'm just gaming. I'm just playing 16. It's wonderful. So, yeah, man, just excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I got to say, Kofi, I saw a tweet out for the Star Ocean 2 remake, and I got to say, it looks pretty good.
Looks pretty good.
Yeah, I'm liking what I've seen so far.
Oh my gosh, man! It's like a nostalgia. It's so funny because I'm a dinosaur when it comes to this game. Where if it's not the original developer, that's still around, I kind of get like a little salty. Like, oh, do they have the vision? And when I saw who was developing it, it was a name of a developer I wasn't familiar with, and so I got real grumpy. But then I looked up who works for the company, and it's literally the same employees that worked at Tri-Ace who developed the game back in 1998 or whenever it came out, 99. So then my frown turned back into a smile because it is literally the same composers like Motoi Sakuraba and many others. So it's a great time, man. I'm very excited.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for the remake as well. I think it looks really good. Excited to hear that it's the same team that worked on the original. That's awesome. So definitely looking forward. It's on my to buy list as well. So Logic, I don't know if Logic, can you hear us? Okay. It's not like you were having maybe some mic issues earlier or some audio issues.
Yeah, I can hear you guys fine. For some reason, I've been getting some feedback on my mics. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
You know what that feedback's from, right?
Is that the sound of Jim Ryan crying? Lion?
No.
Flying?
No, I was going to say your feedback is powered by freedom, but okay, I'll go with I'll go with Jim Ryan as well. Let me grab this super chat as well from Button Basher Gaming with the $5 super chat. I would love to talk Final Fantasy 16 if you're down for another to come in. Button Basher, I appreciate you coming in, but I am on a little bit of a time constraint here because I have to get up really early tomorrow. But we'll definitely love to have you back on. I appreciate the $5 super chat and the offer to come on and join us. But I do want to move pretty quickly through these topics. And so, like I said, I have some time constraints, but definitely want to get you back on again next time. So with that, well, perfect transition, by the way, Button Basher. With Final Fantasy 16 released, I've been playing it. It came out last Thursday. By the way, Logic, I decided to return the collector's edition, the steel case book. I'm not going to. You know what? I was thinking, like, all the talk about being a consumer, Logic, the last week or so, or last 2 weeks, especially over this deal, I decided to exercise my rights as a consumer and say, you know what? I'm not going to tolerate late deliveries and spending $100. I'm just going to send it back to Amazon, man. And so I made that choice. I'm going to send it back.
That's cap.
Wow, you really got rid of the steel box?
Yeah, I'm getting rid of it. Yeah, well, here's the thing. So Kofi, so I order the steel book, and then Amazon sends me an email. They're like, "Well, your steel books or your special edition Final Fantasy 16 is it's not going to arrive till Friday by 10:00 p.m." I'm like, Friday by 10? I can't. I need to play this game on Thursday. Amazon, I need to play this game release day. I can't. I can't. I didn't pay $100 to wait to play. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm paying $100, I should be in front of the line. Kind of like when I pay $100 to go to Hershey Park Amp, and what did I do? I got the what is it?
The Dash Pass.
I got
the Fast Lane Pass.
Yeah. Oh, let me tell you, Game Logic, best investment I've ever made at a amusement park.
Dude, didn't I tell you?
You told me.
Didn't I tell you?
Yeah. You were like, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. Well, let me tell you, when you get to a roller coaster ride and the gentleman who's letting people in line tells you that the wait's 2 hours, and then you look at the Fast Pass lane, there's no line. It's like, you know what? I'm going to spend the $100. It's worth it. It's worth it. It is so
exactly.
Because what turns into what goes from a 2-hour wait becomes a 30-minute wait, and you actually end up maximizing your time and riding more roller coasters than you would if you spend than if you wait in line for 2 hours.
I mean, you definitely get more ROI out of your, the money you spent going to the park. I do it simply because it stops everybody's whining, complaining, and belly aching.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. But it was great. So that's my expectation. I spent $100, Kofi. I want to be front of the line. I want this game to at least be delivered on the release day. So what ended up happening was, I'm like, okay, it's Thursday evening. I want to play the game. I don't want to wait. So I just got the digital version on the PlayStation Store, downloaded that, started playing. Then I get an email the next day. Oh, BRAP, your special edition is coming on Friday at 2. What? Friday at 2? I'm not going to give them my money on principle. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Look, Jeff Bezos he's got enough money.
Facts. It's funny that you mention inconsistencies with day one deliveries. I did not trust Amazon for this particular game. I went straight to Best Buy because they offered 2 steelbooks for the same price that you paid. And I could just walk in right at opening. It was like, what, they opened at 10? I was like in line with some other nerd, so.
Yeah, I should have gone to Best Buy. I just didn't do it because, again, you're paying for the convenience. You're paying,
right?
For Amazon, and I was shocked that because Amazon's been known to break street date.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and look, and I didn't have that expectation that they would break street date, but I did have the expectation that they would deliver the game on time, and not send me an email saying, "Oh, you'll get it by 10 p.m. on Friday." Like, no, that's not okay with me. All right, yeah. So that's my that is my Final Fantasy 16 Steelbook Special Edition story, and yeah. So
now you have money freed up in the budget to get a Starfield Constellation Edition when it becomes available again.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. I might do that. I might, if it's available, I might pick it up. But we'll see. We'll see. Interesting. The special edition will not come with a physical disc, by the way.
Yeah, I mean that's a shoulder shrug for me.
Yeah, which I kind of say that like I don't probably didn't. My best.
I personally don't like it.
I don't.
But I feel like Xbox and PlayStation both do that because they have versions that don't support disk drives. So that's their excuse. I'm going to call it an excuse at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I come out of the software world. Bits are heavy. Like, you give me a physical disc, not a physical. Like, I don't care. It's just me personally as a consumer. I just don't care.
Yeah, I like getting the physical versions, but I might get a digital version. I'm not above it.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about Final Fantasy 16 because
I mean I do want to say one thing about that because I know this is a great controversy, right? Physical versions, blah 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 blah. It's just given all of the evolutions of technology and gaming and PCs that we've been through, it's just kind of hilarious to me that in the days of physical media, at least on PC, we spent hours and hours of time cracking CDs so that we didn't have to insert them into PCs. And some console people did that too, in order to play a game. Expended tons of effort to not have to put up and deal with the existence of physical media. And now when we hear we don't get a physical media in the box, it's a big issue. So that's just me, my personal perspective. That's not me visiting everybody else's intentions. Everybody else can feel the way that they feel. It's just like I'm not going to complain about not getting physical media because, again, of all the time that I spent going through that time when we were trying to do everything we could to get away and free from physical media.
I can respect that. I kind of like the idea of being able to play a game to completion without any content that requires an internet connection. So, like, I like being able to get a disc for any, because I'm primarily PlayStation, but I do own a PC. I don't mind it because, I've been digital on Steam for so long, but sometimes getting a disc and then putting it in and saying, oh, you have to download something before you even play, it doesn't always suit the gaming situation I'm in. But I could definitely understand. If you're primary PC, it's like, that's just the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, I do want to talk about Final Fantasy. I can't even talk. Final Fantasy 16. So, Kofi, I'll say this: Clive over Noctis any day. Any day.
Oh my gosh! You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
there's. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, and by the way, gentlemen, great back and forth, by the way, with the digital physical conversation. I appreciate the commentary, but yeah, no, yeah, I just I enjoyed 15. It wasn't my favorite Final Fantasy game, but as I look back at the main protagonist here in Clive, I mean, like I think Clive's just a more compelling protagonist. The tone of Final Fantasy 16 for me is a nice is I would say the darker tone of Final Fantasy 16 is more appealing to me than the tone of 15. You know, I really wasn't digging kind of the boy band vibe in 15. It had very cheesy moments. But this game does feel like it was influenced. There's a lot of Game of Thrones influence here, which isn't a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. So I'm trying to be careful with the story here too, Kofi, because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm at a point now in the game where I'm starting to see some of the things that were brought up in reviews about the campaign, the story in particular.
Okay.
And I want to be careful with that. Domino's here says it's medieval, not Game of Thrones. I mean, isn't Game of Thrones kind of medieval-ish? I mean, anyhow.
So
and
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just
go ahead,
wanted
man.
to say really quick. So I approached this game with a lot of with almost no expectations, and I say that because growing up, Final Fantasy was everything to me. But most of the time, I loved those games because I had no idea what I was about to embark on, what type of adventure. So I birdboxed all of the promotions for this game, minus the 2020 reveal, and I think maybe in 2021 there was some sort of preview then. But I didn't watch the state of play. I haven't watched any of the gameplay, so I didn't know anything. What summons were in the game? I didn't read any reviews. I haven't seen anything. Another thing, I haven't watched Game of Thrones. I know I'm crazy. People are gonna hate. So I don't have any sort of like, oh, I'm getting this vibe from this game. Another thing is, I just did not like 15. It just didn't work for me. But I am a Final Fantasy veteran, so I kind of compare Clive to some of the older contemporaries in the series. Obviously, we're thinking about like Lightning, going back to Van, or going back to Tidus. Zidane and all them.
I've always called him Titus, by the way.
I know, me too.
Yeah,
Titus,
yeah.
but I know it's wrong, so whatever. But Clive stands with all of them greatly. I would say that in terms, you're right. I just realized I don't want to say spoiler things, so forgive me if I'm catching my own tongue. But the maturity of the overall storyline and giving Clive a chance to grow as a character is one of the best things about this game. And the narrative decides to be written in a way that allows him to grow substantially, and it makes more sense once you're experiencing it. I think you were talking about a particular story point that at first really surprised me, and I was genuinely thinking, why did they do that? But then as I continued on, I said, oh, this actually really resonates with me. And obviously we know that there are big icons in this game that do fight. Some of these showdowns have so much weight to them. There was one of these showdowns, I literally got chills. I was just like, this is going to be like the best thing ever. And once you get a grasp of how the controls work, I'll be very honest, I had to kind of remap the controls to Wolong, because I'm just like, my mind is set in Wolong Fallen Dynasty, so I kind of like mapped everything so that I could just dodge with circle while having my heart like strong attack on triangle. It is over the top, and I love that there's extra thought put into like all the skills. Like for example, holding attack down, as you guys probably know, can charge your blade for heavy attacks to break through people who are blocking. But I love that type of attack can be charged when you're doing anything. You could be charging like a particular summons attack for a different element and still be charging. You could be using your limit break and charging it. It just allows you to roll all these combos over each other. And I wasn't expecting the extra thought and detail to go that length, for combos. Having Torble, I'm forgetting his name. Having your dog companion in there for just that last like juggle to continue your combos is awesome. So I'm just, as the story continues, I went from I wish I kind of had a party to now I'm accepting the the epicness and the focus on less characters to give me a very impactful story, and I can appreciate this Final Fantasy for doing it differently.
I was just about to say that, like, one of the things I was concerned about going to this game was not having, and coming off of the last Final Fantasy game that I played was Final Fantasy VII Remake, and we always talk about Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa, and like the cast of characters in Seven. Aerith, oh, I tell you, man, Aerith, oh, that theme song, man, it still hits, Kofi.
Oh yes.
Oh man, the
Oh
feels,
yes.
man. I'm telling you. Oh my god, I literally will listen to that song sometimes in my car driving, and it hits, man. It hits. It's just my place. I had the Final Fantasy VII remake theme for my PlayStation 4. I wish PlayStation would bring that back. By the way,
Oh,
and I remember I would
miss that.
Me too. I would fire up my PlayStation and my PlayStation 4 Pro, and Aerith's theme song would immediately just like would immediately start playing in the background, and then it was Cloud with his Buster Sword, like like he was facing I forget the name of the city now in Final Fantasy VII, but he's facing the city, and like you see his back, you see the Buster Sword, and like Aerith's theme song's playing. It was just, it was just such. There, I mean, it just pulls at nostalgia strings for me because I mean, this Final Fantasy VII goes back to, geez, I was like 20 years old when when that game came out, and when Final Fantasy came out, it was just this defining moment in gaming. It was one of the reasons why I think the first PlayStation was so successful. And it was a big leap forward for the franchise at the time, coming off of, when I grew up playing Final Fantasy. I mean, I was like 11 or 12. I mean, I was old. I mean, I was young. Now I'm old now, but I'm older. I'm not old, but I'm older. Yeah, see, Black Dragon's like, damn, you're old, Brad. But no, I mean, like that's a thing. And so, but to your point, I had some concerns going into this game that might not be the case. There would be some cast of characters, but you wouldn't have this big party like you had with like Noctis and the boy band, right? But I think that's given Clive the opportunity to grow as a character, which I like. Because I think one of the complaints I might have, and I just because Final Fantasy VII is a little more fresh in my head than 15, because 15 came out like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, I don't feel like there was a lot of character development for Noctis because you were constantly surrounded by the boy band. But I mean, there was some, but not to the extent that we see here with Clive. And I also think that even with Cloud, you get some you probably more than the Final Fantasy VII original game. I think you get a little more insight to his character, his background, but you don't get that development that you see with Clive, even with Cloud in the Final Fantasy VII remake.
And like really quick, I just wanted to touch on something Clive does, and this is the last thing. I hate spoilers for other people, so I just want to touch on this. When I think of the way Clive can inspire people, I think of like Zidane back from Final Fantasy IX, like picking up his friends when they felt down. And I just haven't seen something like that very often from a Final Fantasy main character. Like, like how Zidane would like look at Vivi and be like, "Hey, I believe in you, man." Like, and that sounds really small, but like that type of camaraderie is kind of rare. Like Cloud doesn't really do that. Final Fantasy VIII is my favorite Final
Cloud
Fantasy.
Just grunts a lot.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, Clive does too. I feel like that's kind of a nod to the friend, like that. Like that sigh.
Fine, I'll take your quest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. There's just and there's a lot of really mature things happening in the world that justify Clive's reactions. But like even like Titus, he's kind of like jovial and ignorant to the world and is kind of exploring a brand new world he's entered. Clive is weathered and lives here, so he's using his own experience to kind of like tell people like, look, I've been through the literal worst. This is what I think you should do with what you have ahead of you. And I love that about a character in this series. So Yeah,
Yeah.
props to Clive.
Yeah. No, I did. And I was having the conversation with Game Logic, kind of giving him my early kind of my early my thoughts early on in Final Fantasy 16, and I was kind of like, I was a little bit on the fence at first with the combat. You know, I felt like, and I share this logic, I felt like at times, one of the things that frustrates me a little bit about the combat is that it at times takes the control away from me, and I don't like that. Especially some of the icon battles that I've had so far, where I feel like, you know what, I would have rather than just hitting R1 or the square button, been a little more involved in that. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know why they did that. I agree with you.
It takes away the controller from you. And I said to Logic, I said, this game, like, it feels like Final Fantasy, like the Michael Bay version.
You have a great point.
But imagine if Michael Bay actually had good storytelling. Like, that is Final Fantasy 16 to me. Like, these big set pieces, even the combat. Like, and I said this to Logic. I said, you know, the combat is a little. Early on, I felt like it was a little bit overly simplistic, like just kind of like button mash. It's very much like we think about Devil May Cry. This is like Devil May Cry on steroids, I think.
Yeah.
And you hit the square button. Now you're right. Like it's a little more than that, because like you can power up and do these different combos and things like that, and you can use your icon abilities by just hitting the square button as they charge up, and you could combo like there's certain icon abilities now that I'm comboing that are from different icons, because you collect those. You know, I don't think this is really a spoiler, I guess, but you do get different icons throughout the game, which actually adds some variety to the combat, which is nice, because I think if you just had one icon, I think the combat would have been really boring after a while.
Agreed.
Yeah, but
and really quick, I just wanted to say, like,
yeah.
some of those, as you progress, the icon battles become less QTE. I've experienced, and then there are side quests where you hunt monsters, and I found, obviously you're not doing anything super epic in those hunts, but when the difficulty really scales up is when the game shines. I agree so much. I kind of wish that a hard mode was available without having beaten the game, because I definitely would have chosen a hard mode.
Well, I'm sorry, like real quick, Kobe. That was my complaint to Logic. I'm like, I'm playing action mode. Like, it's so easy. I just died for the first time, and I'm hours into the game. I don't think I'm as far as you are, but I feel like there should have been a harder like difficulty mode, because you're right. As you progress and as you start leveling up, and you start playing, like even some of the mini bosses, those battles start getting a little bit harder, and that's when I think the parrying system comes into play, and you see how that works, right? It starts working like it's nice to parry, dodge, freeze time. You know, like you do the perfect parry, you'll freeze and get a hit in. Like you start using some of those mechanics in the game later on, but early on, like I just felt like, again, like the game. I mean, it's still easy. It's getting a little bit harder. It's good to hear that maybe it gets as you progress and it gets a little more difficult. But I like you, Kofi. I would have liked a really hard mode, because it is an easy game, and I can't even imagine playing what playing in story mode would be like.
Oh my gosh! Did you guys see the equipment that gives you auto dodge? I saw that. I was like, what?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but it came as part of your equipment when you start the game. Like, you can equip something that automatically allows you to dodge. I took that off immediately. I'd fall asleep.
Yeah,
because that's where I get hype. Is when I get that dodge just perfect. I'm fighting this one boss, and it was one of the, like you said, I think this is the second time I died, and I just thought I could rush this opponent down, and no, I ate crow.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I couldn't imagine just automatically dodging that.
Yeah. No, I hit the R1 button, and you could dodge even with hitting the square button. Like if you're in combat, like if you perfectly time like a hit or something, I think you can dodge as well.
Well, it's like, I guess it's like when you hit that perfect like you were saying, like the perfect parry. If you're dealing enough damage at the right time, you'll interrupt
Yes,
them.
you'll interrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it does seem easy for the most part, like from what I've played. And I'm just that's probably my one complaint about the game. That the combat's a little bit too easy, and there's certain, again, taking the controller away from me, it's something that I wish they wouldn't do.
Yeah.
But I think where this game shines for me so far is really the character development and the story. I find the story very compelling.
And the last thing I'll say, I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot, but
No, go ahead. You're good, man.
with smaller parties, like we were saying at the beginning, Sid, Jill, Torgal. I'm sorry, I couldn't believe I forgot Torgal's name. Um, them having their story moments don't feel forced because of how small the party is, and because of that, and the fact that sometimes characters, I will say this, sometimes characters are not available for you. The story feels right when they're not available. I don't want to say why, but like it'll be like, oh, like Sid isn't here for this fight, and you'll be like, oh, because Sid is doing this in support of your particular motivations in that chapter, and it kind of gives you like this. When he returns, he'll tell you something more about himself, and you guys can kind of you guys see that breakdown, that communication. That's so great. Where sometimes you have a Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII, where the cast is so massive. Now when you're writing for something like Final Fantasy VIII, I'm sorry, Final Fantasy VII that's coming out, you have a lot of characters to balance, right? We have Vincent, who's going to be coming into it. We need to see Red 13, his backstory, and Cosmo Canyon, which is going to be epic. And then there's like Wutai Village. We got to talk about Yuffie's background. There's going to be a lot of heavy carrying. But in 16, it's like, no, there's a handful of characters, and they're all going to have these fleshed out moments that feel really rewarding. So
Yeah.
I respect their decision.
Yeah, and I got to say, the voice acting is great in this game. It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Go
No,
ahead.
go
No,
ahead.
I was
Go,
going to
go.
say, so I started with the game completely in Japanese and then switched to English maybe 8 hours in. And I like both a lot. The lip syncing does not work for Japanese speaking characters, so that kind of made me switch to English. And I agree. The voice acting is great overall. I was actually shocked how deep Sid's voice was because I switched over late. I was like, oh wow, Sid got that like that that real like I don't know, very impactful, memorable, deep voice. I was like, that's really cool. And
No, it is cool. Yeah. No, it is cool. And he's a. I thought he was. Yeah, I think he's a great character too. His story and his personality and the dialogue between him and Clive has been memorable. I'm trying not to give away too much of the story, but I'm going to go back to some complaints that I do have though, Kofi. I don't like when you are, let's say, like there was times where I would like do something and go back to Sid, and the conversation would start, and then the screen would turn black, and then it would transition, I guess, to the cutscene. I would have preferred something a little more fluid. I don't understand why he does that. I know it's a minor thing, but to me, it's just, for me at least, it kind of breaks the immersion just a little bit. I don't understand why that's happening. I said that to Logic. I'm like, I wish like when I was engaging dialogue, it wouldn't just go, the screen wouldn't go black and then the cutscene would start and the dialogue would continue.
yeah, I could kind of see that as an annoyance. That I hadn't really.
Minor complaint.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like other things that I haven't said that are negative. Obviously the motion blur. I think like if we're just talking about things that don't exactly sit well with us, I think some of the motion blur kind of irritates me. If I'm moving fast through like a wooded area and I'm spinning around, I just feel like it's just too much going on the screen. I wish I could turn the motion blur off.
Are you playing in are you playing in fidelity mode?
I am not. I am actually playing in performance. Well, I've kind of
Okay.
switched between, but I've spent most of the time in performance. It's actually because I think I just straight up forgot what setting I had it on, and I was trying to get through as much content as possible. Um, so yeah, it's been sitting in performance. The Final Fantasy. I feel like the lip syncing, even in English, isn't as good as it was in Final Fantasy VII Remake.
I would agree with you on that. I've noticed the lip sync is a little off with the English version.
It's a little off.
When you have English dialogue enabled, yeah.
Yeah. And it's tough because like I'm just getting off something like Burning Shores.
Hmm.
And Burning Shores, I mean, Horizon Forbidden West, that lip sync, it's some of the best I've ever seen. So sometimes when you see 16 and it's like a quest cutscene, it's like, okay, we're we're remembering how much Horizon Forbidden West must have cost to get that motion correct so much. Um, but like overall, I don't know. Every chapter just makes me fall more in love with the game. I started off very neutral, like okay, like you said, we'll see how the story goes. Oh, that was cool. And then when those great moments compound so much, and you're like, dang, I'm only like, I think right now I'm almost 70% through the game.
Okay,
At
yeah,
least according to PlayStation's little.
you're definitely much further than I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's just based on the little percentage they show on the PlayStation 5 home screen. Um, that is there are some significant points where I just like I can't believe they keep taking it to another level that makes me smile. So I think you're in for some big stuff. I'm not sure what percentage you might be at, but
Yeah. No. I'd have to go back and look, but no. I definitely enjoying it more than 15. It's not without its flaws. It's set to logic. If I had to rate it right now, I'd give it a 8.5 out of 10. And logic, this could be a game of the year contender, and I'll just leave it at that.
yeah.
Logic says,
I'm on a mission. I don't know if I mentioned this. I'm on a mission to finish 16 RPGs this year, all of which have been released at least in September of last year. So it's all recent stuff. This one sits very high up there. Octopath Traveler 2 will be up there. Legend of Heroes game that I imported from Japan last year, that's definitely going to be up there. Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kiseki 2. And, there's a couple other ones that hit hard with story, but I'm just impressed with the ambition that Square Enix and Yoshi P had with some of these showdowns. Some of these showdowns feel like the end of games. Oh, this is end of game fight 3 that any other RPG would have at the end. That's how epic it is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. That's why I said it's like Michael Bay. It's like a Michael Bay movie.
Right.
Yeah, with better storytelling. Yeah. No, it's yeah. I my plan is to. I'm off next week. My plan is to spend more time playing Final Fantasy 16. Hopefully, beat it. Fingers crossed. So, but yeah. I'm really interested in those icon battles now. They get better. Man, and I got to say is it Jill?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how their relationship develops in the game.
My lips are sealed.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I will say
Okay.
the focus is good. The focus on that is
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else on Final Fantasy 16, Kofi?
I'll keep my mouth shut for now. So I know I talked a lot. But I'm very happy.
Yeah, no, this is a oh, and the music, by the way, the music's really good.
Did you feel like the battle theme for 16 kind of sounds like the beginning of the Final Fantasy 8
Yes,
battle theme? I was like,
yes.
this is 8 in the
Yeah.
very beginning. I'm like,
and I caught something that sounded like the opening, like when you fire up Final Fantasy 7. It sounded very similar to that.
Yes.
Do you remember? Do you know what I'm talking about?
You're talking about like the traditional Final Fantasy theme?
Yes, Final Fantasy 7, or the traditional Final Fantasy theme, maybe. I don't remember.
I
I think it was the traditional Final Fantasy theme. Yeah, I don't even know. I can't even do it. It's like the chiming sound. You know what I'm talking about? Like I don't know how to describe it.
And the OG, right? Not the remake.
The OG.
I think so. I might have to pull it up.
There was something. It sounded to me like it. There's been parts of the game or the music in the game that remind me of that seem to borrow from other. Yes, Josh here says the OG theme is called Prelude. That's what it sounded like to me. But there's been instances where, yeah, Josh is saying yes, it's in there. So I heard it. there was
Caught that.
Either was a dialogue. There was dialogue that was going on with Clive and I think Sid at the time, maybe. But I heard that, and I'm like, wait a minute. And there's other things like older, like Final Fantasy VII, not Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy music that I feel like has been mixed into that a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. I've seen drawings like inspirations drawn from many other games. I'm sure there was one. This is the last thing I'll say is like there was one boss fight. You're like, that is such a cool reference. Obviously, a lot of boss fights are pulling from old Final Fantasy games, but there's a particular knight I really like from the series, and seeing things like that, I was just drawn back. I was taken aback. Seeing that, as a boss fight.
Yeah. What else was there? There was some other stuff. Oh, one thing I wanted to discuss too, Kofi, real quick before we wrap up Final Fantasy 16. I know there was I've seen a lot of discourse over the combat system not being traditional Final Fantasy combat.
Yeah.
And some fans of the series being very upset. I was skeptical going into it. Again, I don't think the combat's perfect. I do miss at times I do miss, kind of being able to strategize a little bit more and kind of pick what character I want to attack and what skill set or what particular skill they have that I want them to use. Yeah. Where that's kind of out of my hands. But I also do applaud them for trying something different.
I cannot agree with you more. If you were to hold a gun to my head and say turn-based or real-time, I'm going turn-based. It's by a small margin, and I don't dislike action-based games. For example, Tales of Arise, incredible, just amazing. Star Ocean 6, The Divine Force, just finished that. I love that a whole bunch.
By the way, it's funny, you mentioned Tales of Arise. I thought this combat was going to be like Tales of Arise. It's definitely faster than Tales of Arise.
It is. In Tales of Arise,
more
there's a lot of... Yes. Yeah. And, but like, stepping away from Tales of Arise for a quick moment, just like you said, configuring my team to have certain amazing like I almost manage my party in a JRPG almost like a football team. I've got specialists everywhere, right? I might have somebody who's really good at spike damage or spreading conditions. I remember back in the day,
that's why I love Persona 5.
Oh, there you go. Persona 5 is another great example. You have somebody who can hit all of the weaknesses.
Someone who could heal
obviously, yeah, somebody who could heal you. Yeah. Somebody who could boost all your stats or bring down debuffs. Those are critical. Way back in the day, sticking with Final Fantasy, I used to have Zell equipped with Doom Train in Final Fantasy VIII because I could always make sure I could spread conditions.
Yeah,
I was always making sure like Zell was doing thousands in damage, but he'd always be confusing or something to kind of slow down enemy whatever. I love managing things like that. So not having that ability in a Final Fantasy game, it's a little bit disappointing. But my experience is I just played another turn-based RPG that gave me that experience. That was Octopath Traveler 2. Very traditional, right? Turns through and through. You can do all of your conditions. You can have all of your spells set up just like that. So I just spent 100 hours playing Octopath Traveler 2. I'm happy with my turn-based experience with that game.
You've got now with Final Fantasy.
Exactly. and that's how I look at my experience now, because I just mentioned I'm playing 16 RPGs in one calendar year. So it's let's go, right? Let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. It just so happens I just posted on Twitter. I happen to be playing 8 turn-based and 8 real-time. It just happens to fall that way. So right now I finished 5 turn-based. And so I'm a little bit I hate to say it, I'm a little bit burned out on turn-based. And I've only played 2 action. So it's just like, where you at with where you are in your menu? Are you hungry for this? Right now, I'm hungry for action. So I guess that's how I look at Final Fantasy for me.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kofi. All right, I do want to move on from Final Fantasy 16 to talk about the injunction hearing that's happening right now out in California. The FTC filed an injunction to stop. They believe that Activision and Microsoft were going to move forward with this merger. The injunction is to stop that ahead of the August 2nd hearing with the FTC's administrative law judge. And I got to be honest with you, I don't even know where to begin. There's been so much stuff that's come out of the hearings the last couple days. I don't even know where to begin. I will say this: it is fascinating to get some inside baseball into how the industry works, the perspective or the opinion of, in this case, Bobby Kotick, his perspective on Game Pass, and then hearing Jim Ryan talk about the perspective that some publishers have of Game Pass, and then listening to Satya Nadella talk, and then listen to Phil Spencer, reading these emails, which are fascinating to me. I think that the one thing that's really disappointing, though, about about some of the coverage that I've been seeing, even for the media, a lot of it's been covered in a way that reminds me of people watching Monday Night Raw. That people have their Hulkamania t-shirts on, they have their they have their cold beer in hand. It's probably not good beer. And they're shouting at the TV. They're using language like scared or crying or whining. Am I missing any other? Am I missing anything else outside of crying, whining, and scared? I mean, it's really disappointing. And some of the, it's funny, like, depending on who you follow, whomever is a console warrior, who's pro PlayStation, pro Xbox, each side has declared victory. It's just amazing to me. The conversation has been really piss poor on Twitter about this, about the getting cooked. Thank you, Sam. That's the other one. The FTC attorneys getting cooked. Like, people approaching this like it's WWE Raw. Like, oh my God, did you see the FTC get hit with the rock bottom? It's like this is a little more sophisticated, a little more complex, a little more nuanced than treating it like sports or WWE. And that's what I'm seeing from a lot of people. And I'm seeing people who are covered. Yeah, and I think part of the problem too is that a lot of gamers are getting their news coverage from YouTube influencers who have a particular bias towards one platform. They're not even doing any research. That's something else that I've seen. Actually, someone actually said to me today, Microsoft allows, because what was it? Somebody had made a commentary about, I think it was Jim Ryan's concern about getting a lesser version of Call of Duty. And that was more directed at, in the future for PlayStation 6. Obviously, Microsoft wouldn't want, not Microsoft, but Sony wouldn't want to share specific details or development kit of the PlayStation 6 to their competitor. Microsoft wouldn't do the same either. And someone was like, oh, Microsoft wouldn't make a lesser version of Call of Duty on PlayStation. They allow DualSense support for the GT PC ports on PC. I'm like, what? Like, Microsoft has nothing to do with that. Whether or not the DualSense Edge is supported on PC. That's not. So there's just been a lot of bad takes, a lot of hyperbole, a lot of just like, hey, this side is won or so and so's getting owned, and it's been a big shit show. It really has, and it's unfortunate because I think this is a great opportunity. As if you love gaming, you love the industry, this is a really good opportunity to really learn. Take this as a learning opportunity to get some insight into how these deals are made. Get the opinions of the decision makers at Microsoft, at Sony, how they view the market. Kind of how the sausage is made. It's a great opportunity here for that. And people are just running wild with it like it's Hulkamania. And it's very unfortunate. So I also, I don't even know where to start with some of the things that have come out the last couple of days with this hearing. Let me throw it to the panel real quick. Is there anything that kind of has either stood out in Game Logic or Kofi? Feel free to chime in, either one of you. Has there been anything at the last couple of days and even today that's kind of stood out to you from this trial, or from this hearing, I should say?
I just wanted to make sure Game Logic went before me. I just don't want to talk over everybody. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go right ahead, man. I think my thoughts on this topic are pretty well known.
Okay. I'll be very honest. I've missed a lot of the, released emails, but I have seen the ones that get the most attention. And it just sounds like Twitter must be a crazy storm. I just haven't really read anything on Twitter. I see some of the emails. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know people are getting killed in some quote retweet somewhere. And talking about, what was it? All these acquisition strategies. I saw Microsoft listing tons of things that they potentially would be interested in acquiring, even before the pandemic started, right? 2019. I think I don't remember much that Sony would have spoken on. I need to probably do more research on that. That's why I kind of want to take a back seat on this. It just, I don't know. It just sounds like a whole lot is getting revealed. And right now, I think publishers want to prevent potentially non-American or non-Japanese entities from owning too much. Like, I'm thinking, Tencent could get too big and other entities could get too big. And so Microsoft wants to take that off the table. Obviously, we know PlayStation is interested in preventing Microsoft from getting too big. So everybody's, trying to consolidate. And that's what I'm seeing from the Xbox camp based on these emails. But other than that, I really haven't seen much. I'll be honest. I'm doing limit breaks in Final Fantasy, so that's it.
So you're actually playing video games.
Yes. I just don't know.
No, that's fair, and that's fair. I mean, there's been a lot of information to kind of sift through. To your point about Microsoft's like wanting to acquire everyone, like that list, I was like, wow, like no stone unturned here. Like they have looked at Sega, Square Enix, who else?
Bungie. Bungie was on there.
Bungie was on there.
Wasn't like IO Interactive or something?
IO
like
Interactive.
I can't remember any.
I mean, but that list was just a list of companies that they had considered acquisitions for, correct? That was not a list of everyone that they had actually opened discussions with.
That's correct.
That's fair.
Yeah, that was a kind of a wish list. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that to me doesn't really signify anything big, right? So we all know that Microsoft went on a big acquisition campaign starting in 2018, which means the discussions to acquire those studios started 2018 or 2017, 2016. So clearly there was a concerted strategic effort for them to say, hey, we effed up by letting the size of our stable of studios erode away. I can't remember the specific number that I pulled, but I think I'd done the research, and I think they've acquired a total of like 18 since 2014, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's kind of patently obvious that they obviously went through an entire Rolodex of everyone that they were going to consider going after, so that they could, in a very deliberate and thoughtful manner, right, clear the decks of those that just weren't going to work and weren't going to fit, right? As far as we can tell from the testimony concerning the effort or the consideration by Zynga, that was a thought exercise, right? That was a tabletop exercise, which they didn't go through with because they made the determination that they weren't going to fit with their portfolio and where they wanted to go. So I just don't draw a ton of significance from that laundry list of. Companies do that all the time, right?
Yeah, they run through that exercise of who they can acquire and if they should be acquired at times too. I think the one thing that I'm sorry, Hap, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's really stood out to me is the Matt Booty email. Now we know that there was an email that was revealed that basically said they wanted to put Sony out of business, and I think we could all agree here on the panel. I think when that email came out, like, oh, okay, like, and I think you said it too, Logic, like that type of dialogue isn't maybe necessarily uncommon within businesses. But what really stood out to me is that Matt Booty was basically saying, "Hey, we can spend Sony out of business."
Yeah.
And he said, and I'll read the piece of the email here. And this is an email that was dated in 2019, where he says, we are in a very unique position to be able to go spend Sony out of business. And he said, they needed to kind of avoid a situation where, like, Tencent, Microsoft needs to avoid a situation where Tencent, Google, Amazon, or even Sony have become the Disney of games and own most of the valuable content out there. What's also interesting about this email is that, and I think this is kind of what you have talked about quite a bit. And by the way, Ham, you are the Oracle of Twitter. I'm just going to put that out there, man. I'm just going to put that out there. You have been, I'm going to sing your praises here, sir. You've been pretty spot on, I think, for the last year or so with just your analysis of this deal. Because we've talked, and you've talked quite a bit about scale here, the ability for companies to compete at scale. And one of the things that Booty brings up in this email is that he says it's practically impossible for anyone to start a new video streaming service at scale at this point. He then says, in games, Google is 3 to 4 years away from being able to have a studio up and running. Amazon has shown no ability to execute on game content. And then he says, content is the moat that we have in terms of a catalog that runs on current devices and capability to create new. And then he says, Sony is really the only other player who could compete with Game Pass, and we have a 2-year and 10 million subs lead. Now, this is obviously before Jim Ryan and PlayStation combined the the PlayStation Plus, PlayStation what was it? PlayStation Now, PlayStation together. Now. Yeah. So again, this email is from 2019. I just thought it was interesting that he talks about Sony in a way that, hey, we can outspend Sony. We can put them out of business, basically. We can spend Sony out of the business. He talks about that Sony's really the only player who could compete with him with Game Pass. Because, Sony obviously has a catalog of content. He talks about the other competitors, or the other big tech, the other big five competitors in Google and Amazon, who Phil Spencer has said that those are in fact their competitors and not PlayStation or Nintendo. But the thing that really, again, the thing that sticks out to me is the scale. And I think Booty also at some point mentioned that they could, lose, $5 billion, whatever, that they had the ability to do that. And also what came out of that is that Microsoft also acquired, one of the things that was kind of interesting too, out of what's come out of this, at least for me, is that Microsoft acquired Ninja Theory for about $117 million in 2019. So, but this idea of being able to compete at scale and logic, I know you and I have talked a lot about this deal and how Microsoft could leverage its adjacencies in ways that may not allow other competitors to be able to compete at scale with them. And when we talk about adjacencies with Microsoft, we're talking about their ability to spend money in ways that Nintendo or Sony can't do. I think really, I think with the panel, would you both agree that maybe the only companies that could spend at the same level Microsoft would be the other big tech firms like the Amazon, the Googles, Apple?
I think those are the definite major players, and like you said, I think if you look at Apple, if you look at Google, they've got or Amazon, they've got deep pockets, but they don't know what they're doing. Right, we saw we saw Google come out with their system and advertise it with more teraflops because it would use cloud infrastructure, and they had some developers making 3 AAA games, and it just all crumbled away. Amazon has done some interesting things. They've tried to one thing I want to give them a quick shout out for. I know this might sound weird, but there was a Korean top-down game. It kind of looked like Diablo. It was called Lost Ark, and it really had issues making it to Western shores before the Amazon division, the gaming division, brought them over. So I like that they tried to get a game that looked like it could be, somewhat of a competitor to at least something like Path of Exile. Mm-hmm. But the game came out, and I don't think it's really getting the type of engagement that they were expecting. So all the money in the world and not having the know-how or understanding how long it takes to make a game that can make a difference in the market is where they're so ignorant. And so I just don't think anybody wants to bleed as much as what you're saying was in that email, right? He said, you said it was $5 billion and it would be worth it, right? Or something like this. I just don't think anybody's going to want to do that until they believe they could get some market share. And I think Xbox likes that because of their current market share. Even though their market share is nothing to brag about to Sony or Nintendo, it's more than some of these other companies.
Yeah. So yeah. But the thing about and so when we talk about Microsoft leveraging its adjacencies, its ability to maybe enact and loss leader strategies because of their deep pockets, the ability to leverage their cloud infrastructure, and they have content they clearly have a catalog of content that they can lean on, and Booty's very clear about, hey, look, Google can't do it, Amazon can't do it, it's really Sony. And then when I think about his comment about, we can outspend Sony. The acquisition of ZeniMax really doesn't speak to me as much as to what Booty's talking about, as much as the acquisition of ABK and spending $70 billion on what is, I think, what did you say, Logic? A top 10 publisher?
Yeah, they're in the group of 10 companies that make about 65% of the revenue in the gaming industry each year.
Gotcha. Okay. And so as I look at those things and I think about what the CMA's talked about, and the ability for, and again, I think the part that stood out to me again is the being able to compete at scale. It's at scale. It's impossible for someone to start a video stream service and compete at scale. Like you think about what the CMA talked about with cloud, and I understand it's a nascent market, and people are like, "Oh, it's a nascent market. It's not really mature." I think the point is that the concern that some of these regulators have with Microsoft is that allowing Microsoft to acquire these publishers that are the top 10 of publishing, or that have a lot of influence in the industry, that have, I mean, what I mean, look at Call of Duty. I mean, I know the focus has been a lot of Call of Duty, but if you look at the entire deal, if you look at King, which Candy Crush just prints money. I forget what the numbers are for Candy Crush, but it's definitely much more. I want to say King maybe accounts for half of Activision's revenue, if I'm not mistaken.
That's crazy. I didn't even know that. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and acquiring King gives Microsoft a lot of inroads into mobile, which could be very lucrative for them. But my point is, like, as I think about what the what the CMA was saying, the concerns of the FTC and some of the other regulatory bodies, I'm starting to think that this is treading in this acquisition could be treading in the waters of being anti-competitive. And I say that because, again, we go back to being able to compete at scale. And even in a nascent market, let's say a cloud market, who else can compete with Microsoft at scale? Who else has a catalog of content like Microsoft? Who else has the infrastructure of cloud? Who else has the $1 trillion, pockets to be able to enact loss leader strategies Matt Booty says that they can do? I mean,
I think it's a reasonable argument to make.
Well, that's my point. That's kind of where I'm going with this. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, the FTC doesn't have a case. This is a waste of taxpayers' dollars." I'm like, is it?
Yeah.
Because if as I read what Booty's saying, I hate saying that, by the way. If I'm reading what Booty's saying and I'm looking at the behavior of Microsoft, and then I'm thinking about the things that they can do as a company that other gaming companies just can't do. Yeah, that's kind of treading in that anti-competitive space. And you could argue that cloud gaming would be a nascent market, but part of that testimony from one of the Microsoft witnesses, I think it was the economist they had, said something to the effect that with nascent markets, you typically have small startups that kind of drive a lot of the innovation and growth. How much innovation and growth from small competitors is going to happen in that cloud market if Microsoft's already in a dominant position? Can those companies really compete at scale?
You would really need you would need a Fortnite level IP that could be on a competing service to draw something that would look more fair. Like, for example, if Epic had all of their services only exclusive in their streaming service and then started to make other interesting and compelling, IPs, maybe that would be a competitive space that Microsoft could say, hey, look, Epic has, Fortnite exclusive and whatever else, let's say they end up making. Or let's look at MiHoYo. MiHoYo with their Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact. That game is making so much money, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, how much is Genshin printing money, man?
It's printing money. Oh my goodness. So I always look at things, is the content compelling? Could it be seen being used in a streaming service with exclusive, access and all that type of stuff? I think if they were in a position to be available in a cloud, environment, similar to what Microsoft's pursuing, I think that might be the first pieces of content I could say, oh, okay, that somebody's getting started, but they still have a lot of work cut out for them, right? Xbox has, I think, with proper management, Xbox has a ton of excellent IPs that could be very compelling. And I will, admit they're potentially on their way, right? We know that a lot of IPs, at least that I love, like, for example, I love Gears. We hear rumors that Gears will be out. It's not like Coalition's around twiddling their thumbs. And there's a lot of other, pieces of content. I'm a big Turn 10 fan. Forza will be out, October or something. So, I think Xbox is also potentially on their way to, having a lot of high-rated games in their Game Pass service from first party. So I don't know. I think it's too soon to give up that much influence as a BK if we're talking about a fair playground for fair play space for cloud expansion. But I think arguments could be made both ways. I don't like to say that my take is correct. So
Yeah. No. And sorry, I'm reading the comments here. Crisis Core says 40 other territories are perfectly fine with this acquisition happening. I frankly don't care that 40 other territories are perfectly fine with the acquisition. I'm actually, I would prefer the level of scrutinization that I've seen by the FTC and CMA. There's a lot of belly aching about because someone brought up, well, what about all these deals they let through with oil and gas and healthcare and all this stuff. I'm actually doing my Bill Clinton voice. We let all these deals go through Hillary, and maybe it wasn't good for consumers. Maybe we should have stopped ExxonMobil. Look, I don't have an issue with them scrutinizing this. I think they should scrutinize this. People are saying things like, "Oh, well, they're protecting Sony. They're not protecting consumers." Well, part of protecting competition is actually that piece of protecting competition can be symbiotic with protecting consumers too. Less choice you have as a consumer doesn't benefit you as a consumer. We look about mass consolidation. We have instances where mass consolidation really hasn't been beneficial to consumers. You look at things like the mobile phone industry, ISP providers, healthcare. The consolidation of those industries really hasn't benefited consumers. Now, one of the other things that came out, and some of the live chat said, you guys are leaving way too much information. I heard from 8 hours every day. Chris, God bless you for having 8 hours every day to spend listening to that. I just don't have the time. I have a job and other responsibilities, but God bless you for that. And I'm not trying to I'm trying to get out of here too, because I have to wake up early tomorrow morning. So this is kind of a brief synopsis of what's transpired the last couple of days. But yeah, I mean, I don't, I kind of look at people who are championing mass consolidation kind of sideways, because I'm like, guys, like mass consolidation really hasn't been good for consumers, historically speaking. And so the FTC, these checks and balances that we have in place, I'm okay with that. I don't view that as a waste of taxpayers' dollars. I view that as just doing due diligence. And if the deal isn't viewed as being anti-competitive, then it'll get passed. And that's it. But at least the question has been raised. Because I think we, Logic, I know you and I have talked about this a lot. I think we're kind of at an infraction point right now. Or inflection point, I should say. Where it's big tech has gotten so big, and now it's like, well, wait a minute, like how big should big tech be? Because we can't undo some of the acquisitions of like Instagram. We can't Logic. What was the was it Waze, and what was the other one that Google bought? The maps.
That was way back. I think they were called What2, I think was the name of the original company that Google Maps came out of.
Yeah, and how many map competitors have we had since? Viable competitors.
Yep, 0.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of we're at this inflection point now where it's, I think the CMA, the FTC, these regulatory agencies are looking at things differently and saying, wait a minute, like, maybe we need to pull the reins back on big tech before it gets too big. I mean, Amazon tried to buy into healthcare. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, you think about like these companies that wield a tremendous amount of access to information. They have a lot of money. They can basically buy their way into industries they haven't had a traditional footprint in. I'm okay with regulatory bodies looking at those things.
Yeah, just one correction. I'm sorry. So the name of that original company was Where2 Technologies. And Byron Lynch says in chat, if Activision Blizzard was a competitor, then I could see it as a consolidation, but there is no precedent for a vertical merger being blocked. Judges don't like their cases appealed. On multiple points, that's untrue. When you talk about vertical mergers not being blocked, typically people are talking about recent history. They're talking about looking back at the 90s and the early 2000s. If you go back further in case law, there are instances where vertical mergers were being blocked. The other thing is that I don't know that I personally believe that this is entirely solely a vertical merger. We often skate by the fact that Microsoft is a publisher. They are a competitor to Activision Blizzard. New consoles come out once every 7 years. It is really that is a pretty small incremental part of the overall game business, and a much larger portion of it is publishing. And in this case, Microsoft is a publisher. Activision Blizzard is a publisher. They are competitors in that space. Call of Duty as a title competes against titles published by Microsoft and vice versa. And so in that component, it is a consolidation. It's not as simple and pure as a component manufacturer or a component provider who provides one piece of a thing in a long supply chain being acquired by a parent level organization that only puts out an aggregate product that consists of that component and other ones.
Yeah. That's a great point, Hap. Buffett says, I wanted to go through because it would nullify Sony's habit of stuff like Final Fantasy 16 console exclusivity launches.
I don't know why we think that. Again, I mean, what I wrote on Twitter earlier this week, or maybe even last week, was, today, right, brokering a paid exclusive deal for software is a legal activity. It is a legal activity that Microsoft can participate in and does participate in. The acquisition of publishers and incorporating them into a larger LLC or a larger corporate entity is not the same as going out and securing exclusive deals as one-offs.
Yeah, and Bubba Fett, I don't know why you would think that would somehow force better consumer options when you're talking about a consolidation in the industry, which leads to less choices for consumers. That's not more options, that's less options. And I don't know why you think it would nullify Sony buying or getting third-party exclusives. It actually may accelerate that process. It also may,
right.
I mean, you may see situations now where big third-party publishers like EA may say, wait a minute, guys, Activision just got this $70 billion bag. Let's see, and their shareholders, the shareholders at EA may say, you know what, guys, they may tap their CEO on the shoulder and be like, hey, Bobby Kotick just got his shareholders a $70 billion deal. You got to remember, these CEOs have fiduciary responsibilities to do, and Bobby Kotick talked about that today in his testimony. These CEOs have fiduciary responsibilities to do right by their shareholders and to make their shareholders money. A legal responsibility to do that. My concern is that this deal goes through, we open this bag, and from a regulatory perspective, you got to remember, like, one of the things that, and I've heard an analyst say this, even if the FTC's attempt to block this deal doesn't happen and the deal goes through, it may make larger companies think twice about consolidating maybe the video game market, where they may say, you know what, we don't want to go through the hassle of this. We don't want to run the risk, spend the time and money, resources on a deal that may not even happen or go through. But the opposite of that could be that you open this bag and it's hard to close that bag once you've opened it. And I go back to my example with EA. Now the shareholders at EA may tap their CEO on the shoulder and say, hey, you know what? We need to shop around, see who's going to give us $80 billion. And then we start this mass consolidation in the gaming industry, which I don't think is beneficial to consumers.
Really quick, I know this is a little bit of a tangent on that. When I think of acquiring ZeniMax, I think overall I don't have a lot of negative things to say about what I'm about to mention, but in getting ABK and all of the employees and all the people that work there, I think it can be somewhat challenging to make sure all of your talent remains and can continue to produce the same level that they have a current reputation for. But when I look at like ZeniMax, immediately I think of Tango GameWorks. It's because I recently finished Hi-Fi Rush, which I found was fantastic. And it is really cool to see that after the acquisition, or sometime during. I know the game was in development before the acquisition was even completed, but it is nice to see that you could have somebody like Shinji Mikami still have artistic pieces that come out regardless of what happened with them joining Microsoft. I would pray that ABK is very similar, but let's be honest, there's a lot of more moving parts with ABK, even compared to ZeniMax. So I think that's one of the concerns. For example, when you look at Sony, when they purchased Bungie, maybe they also had a similar thought, and why there's reports that they had paid more than what Bungie was actually worth at the time. Maybe part of their thoughts was, well, we value these individual employees because we want their input on other things that we might work on in the future. And so they were trying to, put that money to show their investment in trying to make new IPs. So I'm hoping that if this does go through, that they're considering that as well. That it's not like, okay, we have ABK and everything is easy. It could be considered very heavy lifting with all these studios in one place.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Logic.
So one thing I don't understand, and then BRAP, you got a super chat that I want to respond to too. So Boba Fett says, "Be real, Sony has a stranglehold. Exclusivity deals don't work for Xbox." So I'm going to make a greatly oversimplified argument, but just as table stakes, Microsoft cash on hand right now is $104 billion. Sony cash on hand right now is $14.4 billion. I'm not sure that I can understand that the argument is that Microsoft has insufficient financial resources to spend to go after exclusivity deals.
And
if they so chose to pay more money than Sony does for them.
So I just want to piggyback off of that, because Logic has a great point. And so my best friend, he loves the ecosystem that Microsoft is building, and we argue about this all the time. But I think, one thing that Phil Spencer said that was a key to me is he wants to change Microsoft's market share in a significant way. And having these exclusivity deals maybe is just too small, in Phil Spencer's opinion, to make a big difference quickly. So he's like, Starfield being, let's say, instead of buying all of the publisher, just having Starfield exclusive to Xbox, that's cool. But I think in Phil Spencer's mind, that's too small. That vision is too small.
Well, Kofi, according to real quick, I didn't mean to interrupt. According to Phil Spencer, though, the reason why they bought ZeniMax Bethesda was because Sony was going to lock Starfield as a timed exclusive.
I did see that report.
So now what Microsoft is saying, well, hey, like we're just gonna buy the whole damn publisher.
Yep.
So I mean, this idea that they can't compete, or that somehow Sony's got a stranglehold. First of all, that's just a narrative that's coming from like Boba Fett. That's coming from like Xbox centric podcast, console warriors. That because I've seen that narrative, and the same guys that say this skate by the fact that Microsoft also has deals in place that keep PlayStation, that keep third-party games off of PlayStation that are coming to Game Pass. I mean, so both companies are striking these same deals. There's games that come into Game Pass that can't launch on PlayStation Plus. They're not allowed to. But I'm sorry, Kofi, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead, Logic.
Just so we sync everybody up, right? I don't disagree with you or your friend who thinks about, and I've said in fact the exact same thing. And I apologize, BRAP. I'm just going to read one of my tweets because it's just a lot easier. So what I wrote earlier this week, I think yesterday, points of clarification on the Bethesda acquisition. There's business reasons for that. If I'm in the driver's seat, not making the decision, I say, why would I get nickel and dimed and have to frequently do these exclusive deals if I think that that's going to be a long-term threat to my business? Why would I not just buy the supplier wholesale, incorporate them into my production pipeline, and be done with it? So while the spirit of intent of the Bethesda acquisition may have been malevolently anti-competitive at its point of origin, referencing the booty email, it's not anti-competitive. In terms of policy and regulation, it is in fact what I would consider a good strategic move on Microsoft's part, playing to their strengths, changing the geometry of the battlefield, and not playing PlayStation's game, so to speak. So I absolutely agree. Going after Bethesda makes perfect sense, and it's exactly the type of thing that I would do. I've had these arguments, and I've said, why would I dork around and monkey around with something that's not in my direct control when I could just cut to the chase, cut through the red tape, get the job done, right? And do the damn thing and be over and done with it. My problem is that that's when you talk about going after Bethesda. Now you're talking about going after Activision, and that's a radically different scale and radically different set of optics.
I could not agree more. Like, I guess for me, like as a consumer, I'm always looking for publishers to try to push the medium forward, right? Like I love that PlayStation worked on the Decima engine, or even like I'm thinking way back for Xbox when they first got Forza Motorsport up and running. I was inspired by that game. I thought they did damage really well, even though it maybe wasn't on the same level as Gran Turismo. They did a lot of really great innovative things, including like having online and ELO rankings, all that good stuff. I always give compliments to God of War, the original. We always talk about how Cliffy B was interviewed and how he had given recommendations on how the Xbox 360 hardware could best run the original God of War. I'm sorry, I keep saying God of War. Gears of War. Did I say God of War? My bad.
You said God of War, yeah.
I did say God of War. My bad. I meant to say Gears of War with Cliffy B. So like that type of innovation, I want to take priority over just having a ton of IPs in your stable and then having to choose what you publish, because now you've got this huge stable of IPs that you could make, but you don't have the roster to develop them. For example, Killer Instinct, right? I think if Xbox could somehow get Killer Instinct out in this season, where fighting games are like taking like the forefront, we got Mortal Kombat, we got Tekken, we got Street Fighter. If Killer Instinct was announced around this time, like, hey, coming out winter, 2024, like January 2024, I think there would be a lot of excitement around that. But Phil Spencer has spoken like, we would love to do it. We don't have anybody to make the game. There's nobody there who's experienced like the team that what was it, Double Helix or something. That team is defunct now.
I thought weren't they acquired? I thought they were acquired by Amazon.
Maybe they were.
Yeah, I don't know. I could be wrong. I can check. Yeah,
I might be wrong about that. But so I just feel like focusing on the quality of the IP is more exciting to me as a consumer. But to Logic's point, the reason I brought all of this up is, to Logic's point, that isn't the priority if you're just trying to win an increase in market share, right? Like I'm trying to speak to like reputation. Like I look at Xbox and say, oh, they made all of these great games that represent technology, represent great ways to be innovative with multiplayer. But that may not necessarily be the fastest financial win, as opposed to just buying the whole thing and integrating into your pipeline, just like Logic said. So that's the dilemma I have as a consumer with Xbox today.
Well, I want to get this super chat real quick. I'm sorry, Logic. We get this super chat by Byron Lynch with the $5 super chat. Says you can't argue for one legal activity but then against another. Just saying, it seems like you're arguing for Sony's practice but against Xboxes. Actually, we're not doing that, Byron. I don't know if you've listened to the show before. We've actually said we don't have issues with Microsoft making third-party exclusives or even acquiring publishers, or not publishers, acquiring studios. Or as Logic said, no issue acquiring Bethesda ZeniMax. But when you introduce Activision and you compare the scale scope of Activision versus ZeniMax Bethesda, it's a different ballgame. It's a different ballgame. It's a tipping point. But go ahead, Logic.
And let me talk to the legality, because I wrote about this earlier on Twitter too. And again, so there are certain things that we need to start accepting as facts, right? You can't argue for one legal activity but then against another. One, making exclusive deals to have paid exclusive deals to have a publisher, a developer create a game and lock it to your platform is legal today. It has not been declared illegal. Mergers and acquisitions are legal. Certain mergers and acquisitions, a subset of all mergers and acquisitions, can be declared illegal and can be declared in violation of antitrust and anti-competition. Those are your three cases. So we're not arguing one and then allowing for the other. What we have is exclusive deals, such as many people in the Xbox fandom, I'll say, point to it being wrong, in air quotes, that it is a thing that Sony does, when it's really Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft who all do it. There's nothing illegal about that. So that argument should be taken off the table. The second piece of it is why are people making a big deal out of the Microsoft acquisition of Activision? Again, acquiring Bethesda, no problem. That deal was declared legal by multiple regulatory agencies. The deal went through. It was not opposed. It did not take a year of scrutiny. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? Third case, the Activision acquisition, because of its scale, because of the revenue consolidation at the largest players in the market, because of its potential impact, on cloud as well, that is a deal that is being scrutinized as to whether or not it should be deemed legal or illegal. That question has not been answered. 99% of what we've contended on this show is that there are valid reasons for taking a look at the case and scrutinizing it and taking a long period of time and executing due diligence to make certain that the right decision is made. Because there's historical precedents and reasons to do so. Because people didn't stop consolidation of the music industry. Because nobody stood up and stuck their toe in the door for the WhatsApp and the Instagrams. Because of all of this market consolidation that has occurred in the past that has unequivocally, inarguably been bad for consumers. What we are advocating and what we've said on the show is, for God's sake, take a breath, review the case at length, and then make a decision. Just like the FTC has done for the other 22 cases that they've recommended those mergers be stopped, 15 of which they've been successful at getting stopped. 2 of which are under appeal, so it may go up to 17. I haven't had a chance to go back and double check whether or not those closed out or not. So this isn't unprecedented. It's not some wackadoodle thing that the FTC has done as a one-off. It's not all of these various things that lots of people have contended, claiming that about what's going on. It's just not. It's just simply an M&A. It's just simply an M&A, and as BRAP said, at an inflection point in the history of this country, pertinent to the big tech 5, which are all American companies. Right? With the specific eye on trade and commerce that our country has. Again, going back to the disregard for the fact that 40 other regulatory agencies around the world who do not have these 5 companies, right, incorporated in with their base and headquarters, right, like the US does, who don't have the impact, who quite frankly need all 5 of those companies to consistently export their technologies to those companies because they don't have their own innate homegrown ability to do so in many cases.
It's a great point, Logic. And I do want to highlight something too. You talked about the deal here. That this is the FTC that's scrutinizing this deal is the same FTC that approved the Bethesda ZeniMax deal. That alone should allow you to come to the conclusion that there's something different about this deal. Same FTC approved the Bethesda ZeniMax deal, swiftly approved it. It's the same FTC. I mean, I think, and that's a part, I don't think people realize that. But I think that fact should lead you to the conclusion that, wait a minute, there's something different. Places Lena Khan was in charge, and it's the same FTC under the Biden administration. We got the super chat. Byron Lynch with the $5 super chat. I disagree with your premise that games to more platforms, including Sony's, is either anti-competitive or anti-consumer. What say you, Logic?
So I'm really not sure what you're arguing about. I think Byron's linking that to an earlier statement he made, which is you're saying you don't understand how Microsoft. I mean, I guess we're operating on the presumption that when Microsoft makes an acquisition, it's going to allow. I'm just going to make it a binary statement that it's going to allow every single game under the Activision Blizzard King publishing umbrella to be multi-platform and not only be on Xbox or PC or somehow on a platform that is less than all. Is that the claim?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he means by that. Yeah,
I'll assume so until he says something in chat. Not every game, but strong ones. Well, so this is what I don't understand, Byron, is the cherry picking, right? So if we're gonna make the claim that I guess that exclusives are bad, and that Microsoft is a good guy and more fair, then the argument should be that they're gonna allow all those games to be on multiple platforms, right? Not that they're gonna take some exclusives. Because if they're gonna buy the publisher and keep some exclusives, how is that any more right or good or appropriate or more competitive than Sony paying for third-party exclusives on their platform? I mean, that doesn't seem intellectually consistent to me. I mean, so my point is, but I'll just go on. I mean, this is one of the ways, Byron, that your question of I don't understand why COD being put everywhere for cheap, how that would be bad to consumers. Part of this is that you have to take into consideration how it's bad to competition. So again, I'll go back to reading a thing that I wrote on Twitter yesterday. So particularly when we talk about cloud and you kind of conjunctively look at cloud and console and PC and multi-platform, but you include cloud, right? Microsoft is a significant deterrent to new players entering the market not in possession of at least all of those key components that they already have. And in those key components, I talked about development studios, some of which are experienced development studios, desirable and lucrative game IPs, a multi-publisher, multi-game content subscription service that they run, which according to Microsoft is profitable, owning the cloud infrastructure and hosting environments and the overall technology and solutions architecture that is a delivery mechanism for the cloud component of that, including their deals that they already have on existing transport pipelines and critical peering connections, a cloud game streaming service that has a proven, like I said, technology solution and delivery mechanism, as well as their financial strength, right? So all of those things combined make Microsoft a deterrent to new players entering the cloud game streaming market, right? So the only way you would then be able to compete against Microsoft in that environment would be to put those components together, or at least some subset of them, right? The only way you could do that would be either through yet another acquisition, i.e. further consolidation of the industry, or by signing a very large, broad market exclusivity go-to-market agreement, right? So for people who don't do that, you create a barrier to entry that doesn't allow them to enter the market, or doesn't allow them to enter the market in a way that makes sense, where they wouldn't just get their lunch eaten. That's bad for competition. It keeps people out. It's a barrier to entry. It reduces the total number of suppliers you're going to have in the market, and therefore the total amount of choice that you have. Right? Putting COD everywhere for cheap and saying that you're doing that in the name of increasing competition, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Because if COD is everywhere for cheap, if I'm EA, why would I continue dumping money into Battlefield if my competition is now not only COD, which has been eating their lunch anyway, right? But now it's COD available everywhere for cheap because Microsoft has the financial strength to engage in a loss leader strategy to increase its footprint and its distribution. How in the world is this game not good for every single gamer? Every single gamer isn't going to agree to subscribe to Game Pass. Every single gamer isn't going to agree, who plays Call of Duty today, isn't going to agree to switch platforms and go play on Xbox. So how is it bad to me, who's a consumer on the market, as let's just say in the isolated case of a Call of Duty example? Well, Microsoft is now going to take that IP and put it on 2 additional platforms, theoretically. It's going to put it on the Nintendo platform, and it's going to put it in the cloud. Now, greater scope cannot be incurred by a software development organization without adding additional resources. So how do I know that Microsoft is going to add commensurate additional resources to support getting that IP on 2 additional platforms and maintain feature parity and maintain quality across all the different deployment targets? When I look at their track record, that is absolutely not what Microsoft has done. And so my concern as a consumer, if I'm not going to go down the path of consuming Call of Duty through Game Pass, is that I'm going to play Call of Duty on PC or on PlayStation 5, and it's going to be negatively impacted by this consolidation. Right? Because today, Activision doesn't see the point in investing the resources to put Call of Duty in the cloud or to put Call of Duty on Nintendo. So that's 2 instances right there where, following the laws of economics and the laws of software development and software engineering, right, we come to 2 conclusions that show that this deal is not universally good for all consumers in the market.
That's a great point, Logic. And that's kind of been the argument. Everyone's like, well, it's great for all consumers. Well, no, it's not, for the reasons you just mentioned. I want to address something in the live chat. If you're going to come in here and say that CEOs are crying, please leave. It's not the level of conversation we're having here. If you refer to CEOs or leaders of certain companies as crying or whining or scared, you can go somewhere else. There's plenty of podcasts that have that low level or that what I call elementary level conversations about this deal. That's not what's happening here. So you can just leave. We're not going to do that in the live chat. We're trying to have a level-headed conversation about this particular deal.
So let me say, I mean, since most of this has been your feedback to Byron, like I'm not sitting here by any means advocating that Sony be able to buy Activision, right?
No, I wouldn't.
I mean,
agreed.
I wouldn't want Sony to buy Activision.
Agreed.
Right. My big concern in a lot of this is some of my predictions of the way things will go or the way things are already kind of sliding. Is, I think, given the cost of and given the increasing costs and the increasing demand, particularly for AAA game development, right? It is becoming increasingly financially difficult, right, to maintain the production pipeline and the machine that cranks these things out with a great degree of diversity, right? Without going down the path of an Activision that has literally taken somewhere between 9 and 11 studios and converted them entirely to supporting Call of Duty, right? We're in an environment, and we know that the third-party publishers like EA and not 2K, EA and Ubisoft have been casting their eyes about, and Activision have been casting their eyes about to look for sales of their corporations. We know that big tech and big entertainment, big media companies have also been investigating making such a purchase. So one of my concerns is that I feel like we're already in an environment that is easily and can more quickly slide towards consolidation amongst the big third-party publishers. I think that's already a problem. I think if this deal goes through, as I've talked about before, what it seems like there's not a lot of conversation about and not a lot of thought given to is, okay, Microsoft acquires Activision. What the flip does everybody else do? Does it remotely make sense for EA and Ubisoft, Bandai Namco, right, a lot of these other big publishers to continue standing alone when the IPs of Activision, Blizzard, King are merged with the financial strength and the market adjacencies of Microsoft? I mean, like I couldn't. It's hard for me to think of a way in which any of that would make sense. It's hard for me to imagine any course of action which would not start immediately casting about, right, for sales of the company, as I am absolutely certain, and we have indications that they're already doing. So again, none of those things are good for consumers in the long term. none of the consolidations of ISPs, cell phone companies, the music industry, none of that has proven out to be good for consumers.
And that was my point earlier, Hamp. Like, you guys are championing mass consolidation, and I use EA as an example. But you got to believe if Bobby Kotick is getting a 70, well, not Bobby Kotick's not getting $70 billion, but him and the shareholders, they stand to make a lot of money off this deal. You got to imagine other publishers are going to look at trying to sell because of the deal that ABK just got. And you got to imagine that there could be more consolidation to be able to try to compete with Microsoft, especially if Microsoft continues to buy publishers or studios. This could be that tipping point, and that's cause for concern for me, because again, we have, like you said, Logic, we have other industries, we have ISP providers, we have mobile phone providers where there's been mass consolidation. There hasn't been any real benefit to consumers with those consolidations. Byron Lynch says, $5 super chat says, I disagree with your economics, but that's okay. Engage in discussing, and you've been respectful. My opinion isn't out of the blue, but neither is yours.
Yeah, and let me be the first to say, as we've talked about in past episodes, if the FTC looks at this, and the judge looks at it, and the ALJ looks at it, and the appeal judge looks at it and says, yay, verily, this is good to go, then I'll say thumbs up and I'll carry on with my life. I'm already carrying on with my life, right? Like, so I'm not saying, no one has ever heard me say, shut this deal down right now. This should have never happened. What are we doing? What I've said is that the deal deserves scrutiny and due diligence.
Yeah, none of us have said this deal shouldn't happen. Well, I have concerns about the deal. I said earlier, I think this has started a trend in anti-competitive behavior. But ultimately, it's up to the judge, to the FTC, to decide whether or not that's in fact this deal passes the sniff test or not. And like you, Logic, if this deal goes through, fine. I mean, ultimately, my concern, big picture, is just mass consolidation in the industry. That's what I'm hoping doesn't happen as a result of this.
Yeah, and in fact, what I've said is that what should hopefully happen most of the time when these things happen is we should find the good middle ground, right? Which, in my opinion, and the way that I think this thing is going to go down in the U.S. is that a merger acquisition deal is going to get approved, but it's going to be under a restructuring of the deal and some decision for there to be divestiture, just like the CMA has asked for, and just like has happened in the case of a lot of M&As in this country, right? They get approved, but in order to get across the finish line, the acquiring company needs to agree with the selling company that some component is going to be sold off, right, to a different entity.
Yeah. Byron's asking, so Logic, if you were Phil Spencer and Microsoft board came to you and said, we need to grow Microsoft gaming revenue to $30 billion by 2030, how would you decide to get there?
First of all, I would take my golden parachute. Phil Spencer is pretty old, and I've already predicted that he's going to retire. I forget what the specific number of years I think
he's, after, if this deal goes through, or if it doesn't, I think he's hanging up the cleats.
Yeah. Let me shoot. That's actually, was that from Byron or was that from Player?
Oh, that was from Player. I'm sorry. They both have red. Yeah,
Yeah. So let me chew on that a bit. First of all, I mean, just right off the top of my head, I need to do some quick math and decide if I think growth by 30 billion is actually a reasonable ask given where the company and the market is right now.
And let's assume that was asked by the board of to Phil Spencer. Yeah, I mean, you could say, hey, let's try to go after ABK or a big publisher, but you got to understand there's potential alarms that could be raised with acquiring such a publisher at that size. This isn't, like we said earlier, this isn't the same in terms of scale and scope as acquiring like Bungie or acquiring ZeniMax Bethesda. It's just not.
Well, and that's, I mean, one of the things I said when this deal was first announced, right, 18 months ago was like, and I've said, frequently, like, look, when Microsoft made this decision to go down this path, they knew they were going to wake the bear. And I don't disagree. I think some people have said in the chat, Sony woke the sleeping bear with respect to Microsoft. And I've said the exact same thing, and I completely agree, right? But Microsoft in turn should have also known that they were going to wake the sleeping bear by making a bid for this large of an acquisition, and I hope would have anticipated them encountering this amount of adversity. But there are indications that they didn't, right? That they made their risk management bets that things were going to go easier in the UK and things were going to go easier than they did here. So that's a problem. I mean, what I've commented on before is, and again, fanboys can have different points of opinion. I don't personally feel like Sony has leveraged a lot of effort to kind of flummox and befuddle Microsoft getting this thing across the finish line. Jim Ryan seems to have put most of the operations that are of critical concern in the hands of Herman Hulst, and he seems to be handling those with aplomb, leaving Jim free to lift a finger that causes a lot of consternation and frustration on the Microsoft side, who appears to be paddling with a bunch of duck feet under the water, right, with a superstar lawyer that they've hired out of DC, with Brad Smith flying all over the place, with an army, with their already army of legal team in play. Like, I just feel like a ton of Microsoft leadership and Xbox leadership is focused on this deal, and not on other things that might be of more core concern to gamers and people in their own constituency. And that's a problem, and probably wasn't part of Microsoft's strategy if they didn't figure out how to risk mitigate it before they got here.
Yeah. Byron also has a $5 super chat. Says there's discussion. Their discussion about the CMA. Not a lot of discussion about the 40 regulatory bodies that have said yes. How do you feel about the global consensus? I said earlier I don't care about the global consensus. I think we talked about that there's reasons for that. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add to that, Logic or Kofi.
No, I mean, the same thing. I mean, I don't. First of all, I think the extrapolation that it is a global consensus, I don't know that I agree with that or that that's correct. Each regulatory agency is steeped in the culture and evolution of trade and commerce within its own sovereign nation, right? Which is wildly different across the nations. How they feel.
I'm sorry, Logic.
Yeah, go ahead.
He said, why so much weight in the CMA? Well, the CMA, the EU, and the FTC are the big regulatory bodies. Like, without getting their approval, this deal doesn't happen. Like, if the FTC blocks this deal's done. Go ahead, Logic. And I say it's done because the CMA's already blocked it. The EU's approved it, but the CMA's blocked it. So go ahead, Logic.
Yeah, and all I was saying is, So the auspices under which the foundational rationale for why Brazil decided it was good for them may or may not be the same as Japan's decision making, right, or Chile's decision making. They're just wildly different. The cost of goods sold, in terms of the raw materials in the assembly, the deals that are brokered, right, the tariffs that are in place for each of they're just wildly different. And so part of the reason, I guess, that I have a problem with this notion that, 40 regulatory bodies have approved it, why are these 2 regulatory bodies holding out? It's not, this isn't student council, right, where people are leveraging a vote all within the same kind of regulatory framework, right? They're all making their own decisions for what's right for their country.
Yeah, real quick, we have Falky with us, who, Falky, did we make it to Thursday? Did Planet Earth make it to Thursday? We did.
Yeah, mate. Thursday is a glorious day. They're still carrying on with the court case. There's still craziness happening on the Twitter Dome. But more importantly, it's sunshine outside. So,
yes, the sunshine is the most important thing above all else. So. But Falky, thanks for joining us. I know you wanted to jump in real quick and just chime in with regards to the conversation we're having here. So what are your thoughts here?
Well, first point would be to piggyback off what Game Logic was saying around the different territories and that approving it. And I'll divert slightly. The issue with global business is the jurisdictions. And if you operate a global business, you need to be able to pass and operate in multiple jurisdictions. That's why all these big companies have got localized businesses in every country. They have to be incorporated and all that sort of stuff according to the local laws of that sovereignty. And then they usually have regional head offices that bring all the information together that then feed it back up to the main head office wherever that's located. So, for example, use Japan. Their trade competition commission, whatever you want to call it, they found no reason why to block it because Xbox has got such a minor standing in that jurisdiction. How could they possibly say it was anti-competitive? And it's the same for most of the jurisdictions that have said yes. The level of engagement or market share that Xbox has is so minimal that to block it would not be consistent with anti-competitive, or to even allowing it is not going to improve their standing. So what the big players though are the UK and the EU and America. They're quite pivotal because that's where Xbox, particularly in this instance, has their larger market shares. And that's why there's a divergence from all these smaller territories and the larger ones. If you had someone like, if Xbox was in a 50-50 situation in, I don't know, use Japan for example. If Xbox was 50-50 in Japan, you would have got a very different outcome because it is commensurate to the position within the market and whether there's a competition view or not. And different sovereignties have different ways of regulating their markets. You'll find that most of the OECDs are about 80 to 90% similar, but they have different ways of regulating them and different levels that they can regulate. CMA said, we're just going to block it. We don't have the funding to be able to do what the EU is going to do. And the EU's got a different perspective. They go, yeah, you can do it, but we're going to make you bleed for it. If you agree to it, you're under these concessions and these requirements. If Australia and New Zealand take a similar approach to what the EU and the UK have found, they're likely they'll just block the deal because they don't have the funds and the resources to be able to administrate those kind of concessions. So, and that's not necessarily speaking to the pros or cons of the argument. That's just what the regulators are actually capable of doing. So, yeah, it's the FTC stuff for this injunction's been interesting. It's certainly been amusing to watch some of the commentary that comes out of it, though I reserve my perspective or opinion until the closing arguments have been completed to find out what we're actually going to get.
Yeah. That's a great point, Falky, with regards to why the different countries, regulatory bodies for different countries may look at this differently, scrutinize it differently. I think that's important because people typically just say, well, 40 being a bigger number, right? They just kind of dumb it down to that. Well, 40 people say it was okay. So that means that it's good, because you only have 3 people that are saying it's bad. And that's it's a little more complex than that, a little more nuanced. Go ahead. I'm sure. Go ahead.
Oh, you could say this is where percentages and whatnot can fudge the actuals of what's going on when you determine volume. More than, was it 60 something, nearly 70% of Xbox's revenue gets generated in the US. So 40 countries in those 40 countries are probably accounting for combined maybe 5% of their revenue. Are we talking about 40 countries that contribute bugger all to the system should outweigh the concerns of the regulator in the country where most of it comes from? The only reason the CMA got to do any kind of input on this whole deal was because Activision had people employed there and were recognizing revenue over there. If they didn't have those offices and people employed there and revenue being recognized and taxes being paid or lodged, CMA would have had no grounds to encroach on it. So, that's how it was set up and that's how it was structured. But I should point out, the CMA and the EU came to almost exactly the same conclusion. They just had slightly different ways of dealing with it because they've got slightly different ways of administrating in their regulations.
It's a great point, Falky. Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's why I say this thing's more nuanced than people realize. And Logic, I got to ask you a question, man. And please, you could fact check. I've asked you to fact check me here, but Play saying BRAP federal judge has the final say in all mergers and acquisitions in the United States. FTC cannot overrule federal judge. What I've been discussing with Player that this is actually an injunction hearing. The FTC filed for this injunction out of concern that Microsoft and ABK would move forward with this acquisition ahead of the August 2nd hearing that the FTC has scheduled with their own administrative law judge. And that even if and my understanding is even if this injunction, the judge rules against this injunction by the FTC, that August 2nd case could still potentially happen as well. Am I understand that correctly?
Correct. Yeah. So this hearing is, like you said, for a preliminary injunction. It's to prevent Activision and Microsoft from consummating their marriage, which would, basically be them disregarding their upcoming hearing on August 2nd. If the judge grants or doesn't grant the PI, it is the FTC's decision then if they will go ahead with their hearing on the 2nd of August. So if the judge doesn't grant the PI, the FTC can say, roger that, we're going to drop our suit and they don't have to appear before the ALJ and they can just go ahead and complete their M&A. Probably guessing that won't happen, given just all of the fervor that there's been around this. But there's no direct judicial coupling between the two decisions. They are separate. Now they have a symbiotic relationship, if you will. So the calculus that will get done and gets done a lot of times is the judge doesn't grant the PI. So first of all of the evidentiary findings from this hearing will be available, admissible, and taken into consideration for any follow-on proceedings. So they'll be part of the material that's reviewed for the ALJ hearing. Let's say Microsoft loses that ALJ hearing, they will then obviously file for an appeal in a federal circuit court, and that judge will have access to everything that's been surfaced in this hearing. So some of the calculus that could get done, and this is why I poo-poo on all the notions of all the speculation and trying to future quarterback this thing. The ALJ could say, hey, look, they lost the effort to get a PI called. That judge's findings were largely in favor of Microsoft. If I disapprove this deal here, it's probably going to get appealed. That federal circuit court judge is likely to also then overturn any decision based on the same findings that the judge made for the PI. So that ALJ could just say, yeah, I'm not going through all that, and I'm not going to disapprove the deal. That's a whole ton of what ifs. I think so. Where I personally stop is that there's not causality, right, in linkage between the two decisions. This judge is going to say PI yes or PI no. If she says PI yes, then it's full stop for acquisition and ABK, and they have to take into consideration what they're going to do about this whole $3 billion breakup clause, if they're going to continue and show up in front of the ALJ in August. If she says no, I'm not granting the PI, then they can go ahead and consummate their marriage at risk, for that to be overturned and then to have to break up after the fact and after they've spent a lot of money. And that's just kind of where my own personal speculation stops.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where player. I'm not sure where you're getting your information from, but oh, you're saying you're not talking. Well, I was talking about this particular case. You talk about the federal judges.
Correct.
Okay. So if you're saying the federal judge after, if Microsoft appeals the administrative the ALJ, then it would go to a federal judge.
But again, that's a ton of what ifs. Like many of these deals, including the 15 out of the 22 that I talked about earlier, the companies have decided that the juice isn't. There's not enough juice for the squeeze, and they've stopped their efforts to continue down the path of the M&A, which is a possible outcome of when Microsoft and Activision go back to the table to talk about what they're doing about this $3 billion breakup clause. Should the deal not complete by July 18th, I think the date is, which won't happen if the PI is granted. And there's already been statements, it may be saber rattling yet again on Microsoft's part. There's already been statements that, Microsoft supposedly will walk away from the deal if the PI is granted. So I don't know.
I think Bobby Kotick actually said if the PI doesn't go through, I believe he said today that that Activision would walk away.
Yeah. So, Player Play, I do want to answer your question that you asked earlier, and this is fairly lengthy and detailed, as people should expect if they ask a question in the chat.
I'm sorry, real quick, before you do, Falky or Kofi, I heard someone chime in, or just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone here that was trying to chime in.
No, that wasn't me. I'm sorry.
No, I was just chuckling at what Game Logic said.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Logic.
Okay, so I'll spit this out quickly. So the original question was, so Logic, if you were Phil Spencer at Microsoft Board, came to you and said we need to grow Microsoft gaming revenue to $30 billion by 2030, how would you decide to get there? And I'm so glad Falky is here because he can comment on whether or not my math is, the basis of my math is sane. So in the console gaming industry, amongst the console platform owners, last annual revenue numbers, roughly, I may not have updated them for the most recent round of earnings, but it's about $25 billion for Sony, $16 billion for Microsoft, about a little bit less than 12 for Nintendo. So you're talking about $53 billion total, right, available in the industry. So assuming it's a closed loop system and the only way you're going to gain revenue and gain market share is by taking it from someone else, you're telling me that I have to capture 3/5 of the revenue in the market within the next 7 years. So first of all, I'm going to say, yes, I am going to pursue acquisitions because that's the only way to get there quickly. My big but in that is, however, the way I would manage the production pipeline would be wildly different than the way Microsoft is doing it now, and it would not be a creator-led studio approach. And we can go down the rabbit hole of how I'd manage the production pipeline later. I talked about that maybe in a December episode at very extensive length about what I felt they needed to do to fix their production pipeline. I have some of my craziest theories in here. I would start iterating on the Xbox like a PC. And so one of the things that I've said is that this whole notion that Microsoft used to talk to, which they've stopped talking to, is that the Xbox is basically a lower end PC and that they would iterate on it, as needed or more frequently than we have come accustomed to seeing in console generations. I would engage in executing that strategy, right? And there's little to no reason why there can't be an iteration of the Xbox within this console generation every X number of years at a frequency less than 7. And you could still deploy software across those two versions of the Xbox in the same way that developers have to accommodate multiple possible configurations of the PC. I would personally take Xbox All Access to the cell phone model. And so as I started iterating on those higher end Xbox consoles, if you bought into Xbox All Access, I would build a model that allowed you to upgrade to those iterative Xbox, right, top end series consoles, every periodic subscription rate. And then I would move Xbox Cloud Gaming to a mega over-the-top service in conjunction with other aggregated streaming services. That would include music, video, and gaming. I think what is missing in the market today is that you've got a clump of music streaming services over here. You've got a clump of video streaming services over here. And you're starting to see a clump of gaming streaming services over here. Typically, your big spending consumers who like content and like media typically like cross media. So they like music, video, and gaming. And I think there's an opportunity to latch onto a nascent market, particularly when you talk about over the cloud and getting into overseas third world country markets and hitting people on mobile devices. I think that's a much more lucrative approach, particularly if you have tiers and you allow people to stack those services, or at least force them to always buy 2 of the 3. I think that is an area where you could grow an addressable market and start hitting at some things that are outside of the closed loop of the current gaming footprint and start to gain some market share.
It's a great answer, Hamp. I always said Microsoft should hire you, probably.
I think there's a little bit further to go on top of what Hamp's just said.
Yeah, go ahead, Falk.
There's particularly in that, say, the cross-media piece, but it's more around the application of how best to monetize in that situation. And one of the key challenges you would have is having spent the last better part of a decade in conditioning your current consumers to behave in a particular manner or expect you to behave in a particular manner with your offerings, to redistribute that so that your monetization is going to be less about reaching into their pocket to take their money and more around how do we passively generate revenue without them feeling like we're snowballing them. So, or snowmanning them, rather to say. So there's obviously some impacts from strategies outside of entertainment that's likely to occur. And I know everyone hates advertising, but it's a big thing in mobile games, and it's why mobile games make so much money. That would likely be a strategy you would have to employ initially. How you employ that is anyone's guess, but there might also be the need to implement a strategy where certain games are released episodically rather than in one whole unit, in order to get that pipeline to start producing content. So what would normally be a 40 to 60 hour game could turn into 5 to 8, 6 to 8 hour games, or episodes of a game. So, and then there's also the ability to fine tune and annual releases to work off a standard platform, and you can nickel and dime the updates as they come out. So that's some further strategies around that business idea that Hamp's alluded to. But you certainly need to be able to grow your consumer base as a primary point, because that's going to get you the most percentage on return.
Thank you for that. No, thank you for sharing that. That's very insightful, Falky. You know what, Falky? We got to figure out your schedule here, because there was something else that came out of this, and I'm not going to talk about it tonight, but there was something else that came out of the hearing today. Bobby Kotick gave his provided his thoughts on Xbox Game Pass, as did Jim Ryan. So I want to talk about that, because I know you and I have talked about Game Pass. I think one of the first conversations that I think the first time I was, I guess, introduced to you via Twitter was a conversation you had with the late great Optimus Code about Game Pass. So we got to figure out a time to coordinate to have you back on BRAP to discuss that, because I thought that was kind of insightful, kind of interesting, his perspective on Game Pass, and why he feels like it's maybe not necessarily good for them based on things that he's seen in Hollywood. So we got to get you back on, Falky, to discuss that.
Yep. No. We will certainly set up a time for that.
Yeah. Look, there's certainly a lot more to talk about here with regards to the hearing and some of the news that's come out of it. We didn't get a chance to touch base on all of it, but I probably will do a follow-up rant on some of the additional information that comes out the next couple of days. Actually, tomorrow is the last day of the hearing, so we'll get some additional information tomorrow, and I'll probably do another BRAP rant. But definitely want to get Falky back on to discuss Kotick's comments on Game Pass as well. On that note, I just want to give a big thank you to everyone in the live chat, and appreciate your time. Please hit the like button. We have like 172 people watching, only 41 likes. Please smash that like button. And if you get, and also if you haven't subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. And if you want to give me a follow on Twitter, give me a follow at BRAP. You can follow me at BRAP_podcast. That way you'll get updates on when we go live with BRAP rants and the like. So also want to give a big shout out to the panel here. I want to thank the panel of Game Logic, Kofi, and Falky. Kofi, hey, always a pleasure discussing video games with you, man. I can't wait to finish Final Fantasy 16, and get you back on, discuss the ending of Final Fantasy 16. Kind of do maybe a review of the game once we both finish it. So, but thank you again, Kofi. Appreciate you coming on. And if you want to be found, let everyone know where they can find you.
Absolutely, man. Really quick, I would love to have maybe a review / spoiler cast with you. That sounds really wonderful. And yeah, I'm loving the game. You guys can catch me at creative_Kofi on Twitter. I will be posting the review of hopefully some games I've been playing or finishing that will be out in the US later this year, namely Dragon Quest. I'm sorry, Dragon Quest. Disgaea 7. If you're a Legend of Heroes fan, I have played Trails into Reverie. I have over 200 hours in that game. It is wonderful. You can always find my takes on that game. And then, Megaton Musashi, Level 5's Gundam anime-inspired game, which should come out later this year. I've also completed the Japanese version, so I'm always posting that kind of stuff, and hope to see you online.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again, Kofi. And Falky, always a pleasure to have you on. Again, we got to coordinate some time to get you back on. If you want to be found, let everyone know they can find you.
You can find me at Forky87 on Twitter, and occasionally gate crashing BRAP's podcast.
Hey, open door policy, sir. Open door policy. And then Game Logic, thank you, Game Logic. Always appreciate your perspective. And I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, let everyone know they can find you.
You can find me here, for one, over on Twitter under Game Logic, and then over on my own show, the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. That 2 is a 2, the number 2. I want to, only other comment, just because we didn't get a chance to talk about it, that I'll drop is the one interesting thing that I did see coming out of the hearing today was that almost half of PlayStation 5 owners own a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, I was surprised by that, by the way. That was surprising. Yeah.
I don't think it's overly surprising. There's a lot of PlayStation owners have a...
they have good taste.
A good taste. They have a PlayStation and Nintendo got very similar points of strategy, even though people like to say they're not. They do. So what you find is a lot of PlayStation owners who like RPGs and action RPGs and platformers and all that likely will have kids or they have their own taste where they can get things like Octopath Traveler and Bravely Default and other games that are RPGs or action RPGs or whatever you want to call it, that they're only available on the Switch. And when you look at the cost points, they're not too dissimilar, but it's far, in Australia particularly, it's far cheaper to buy a full price Switch game than it is to buy a full price PlayStation game by the tune of about $50.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Really? $50? Wow.
A full price, the Final Fantasy 16, dead stock standard version in Australia, $120 for PlayStation 5. The brand new Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, $79. So there's $40 difference in top tier game there. So
how much does a PlayStation 5 cost there?
$750.
Is that after the increase?
That's what they're currently on the shelf at my local games boutique. You can get them cheaper if they're on sale. $750 for the console, and then you got to buy the games on top of that, or in controls. Although that's just the stock standard. The God of War bundles were $900. So they had all the 2 controller piece and all the rest of it. They were nearly like $890 or $900. So, but yeah, brand new Switch OLED. I think it's like $400. So they're nearly half the price of a PS5. So if you're looking at value for money, the Switch is, even though they cop it for never putting anything on sale, the Switch is a long way in front of everyone else. And particularly when you see how many games come out and how easy it is to play them, it's certainly an appealing point. But then again, the habits of a PlayStation owner and are very similar in that model. Buy the consoles, buy the games, own the games, not necessarily buy an access point and a subscription. So.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't realize how. I didn't realize how much
yeah,
more
I have more
expensive.
questions,
Yeah,
but I know we're at the end here.
Yeah, that surprised me, Funky. It really does, considering, how much games are Nintendo games are now, like, Tears of the Kingdom, $70 here in the US. So
the PSVR 2 and console bundle with a game, I can't remember which game it is. It might be the Horizon Call of the Mountain. Is it Call of the Mountain, whatever it was called?
Yeah,
the Horizon game they released.
Yeah.
That bundle
Yeah.
is $1,200.
woo!
My gosh, was this a thing with PS4 games? Like, how much is God of War Ragnarok on PS4?
It's $10 cheaper.
So $110?
$110.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Okay,
Yes, we understand. Cena.com, we understand it's Aussie dollars, Australian dollars. I get that.
I get that.
But it's still it's
Yes.
It's expensive.
Hey, look, you check out the exchange rate. It's worse if you tried to buy it in US.
Yeah, I was going to say the exchange
Whoa.
rate. Yeah. Well,
Just
Falky,
the difference between the two. Go ahead.
I was told that exchange rates don't matter, but
Yeah, Max Wainscott in chat says, I'd like to know the inverse stat, how many Switch owners own a PS5, probably not 50%. Anyone could speak on my thoughts on these numbers if you have a different opinion. I mean, to me, Max, the numbers wouldn't be that different. There's been about 126 million Nintendo Switches sold. The combined PlayStation install base across PS4 and PS5 is probably somewhere around 130, 140 million. And so if almost half of those own a Nintendo Switch, that puts it right around probably 60 million, which is about half of the Switch ownership. So, I mean, it's pretty much very close to 1-to-1, most likely.
Well, I've got two of them in my place. So.
Well, I mean, my household has 3 Nintendo Switches. We also have 1 Xbox and 2 PS5s.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But but my household is in the norm though,
Yep.
Yeah.
Just on the statistics piece that Hamp was just saying, that I read a couple of weeks ago in some information that came out when Sony did all their segment pieces, that PlayStation 5 sales are still around a quarter of PS5 buyers have never owned a PS4.
Yeah,
That's impressive.
it is.
Wait, can you say it one more time, Falky? I'm sorry, I missed it.
So nearly around a quarter of PS5 buyers are still tracking up till whatever that date was, are still never owned a PS4. So nearly a quarter of the buyers of the PS5 are new people entering into that ecosystem.
I wonder what the breakdown of digital versus physical version of the PS5 that they bought. Because if they bought digital, that is just a win for Sony, right? Because they're just locked in.
Absolutely. The flip side to that, though, and I'm showing a little green here, is Xbox has stalled out a fair bit, but they're still tracking to a point where they're going to retain everyone from the last, so the Xbox One,
like 8th gen.
I think it was.
Yeah,
from that generation. Now, considering the amount that are coming on board with PlayStation and how good the Switch has done, if they're able to just maintain that install base from the previous generation without losing them to PC and without losing them to PlayStation, all the rest of it, that's a big win for someone, for that particular organization who are genuinely flailing about in the water at times, particularly with the amount of content that they don't have. So there's obviously hardcore supporters, but there's a broader base outside of Twitter and social media which engage and remain engaged for various different reasons. And Xbox is well known. Xbox's biggest engagement point is their ability to do multiplayer is better, or being in that ecosystem is more difficult to exit and move to somewhere else. Whereas that's not necessarily the driving force behind PlayStation or Switch. So they've all got their, I refer to it as a triangle. They've all got their key points that they're really good at doing. And what you'll find is consumers will generally gravitate within that triangle to a certain point. So they'll be more like Switch PlayStation because of the way they do their buying habits, or they might be Switch Xbox because they prefer Xbox's online games and the sports stuff, and they use the Switch for mobile, or vice versa. So if the focus is in that triangle, the focus is that the consumer is held within that group, then there's an element of positivity. I won't say victory, but there's an element of positivity there across all the major console owners. And then you've got mobile gaming sitting outside that, which is, who knows.
It's mobile's they were discussing. I think the hearing today were discussing the mobile market. It's just a different beast. I mean, they're just
the business.
Yeah, go ahead.
The business model for mobile is very simple. Create something that you can jam a 10 or 15 second ad into, and have that at a regular interval of every 45 to 60 seconds. And as long as those ads keep rolling through, and the microtransactions are a secondary point to that, they don't care, because it's all about advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I think why they say it's
so lucrative.
I thought Kotick said that maybe like I don't want to say 2%, but it's a very low, very, very low percentage of people on mobile are actually buying games. It's very, 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 very low.
It's almost I have to pay for it. No, I'll go past that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless they're like $2 or $3 or something. But I mean, Fruit Ninja's a great example. It's the most easiest thing. Every level 60 seconds, and all you're doing is swiping the sword across the screen and try and beat your high score. And after every level, there's an ad or two ads, and if you click on it to try and get out of it, and you accidentally go in it, then they get extra money for that. That's why the X gets grayed out.
That's
so
the invisible X.
It's just engage. No. The more they can put on the screen, so you'll see there's a screen there, and then there's banners of ads all around it. The more real estate on the screen they can run an ad through, the more money they make. And you buy the game for 99 cents, or the free version's chock with ads, so you can't play it. So you pay the 99 cents to go to the paid version, and it doesn't get rid of the ads. So if they have
the ads are just less frequent. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah. No, it's almost brilliant, by the way, because those games are so like my wife's not a gamer. She plays Fruit. She doesn't play anymore, but she was playing it. Like I called her. I'm like, "What are you playing?" And like it was just easy for her to pick up and play, and she got hooked on it for a little bit.
Yeah, my wife's that new craze, because any social media craze, and they got game crazes now. You seen the one where you play music and there's 4 little buttons you got to press?
I haven't seen.
You guys seen that one yet? Oh, my wife plays it all the time. It's fucking great. And same deal. Go through the song.
It's like a rhythm game?
Yeah. So there's four boxes at the bottom. It's like, think of it like Guitar Hero, but on a phone or a tablet.
Got it.
So the things, and you either press it or you swipe it, or you in different directions or whatnot. And this thing it's viral. Every man and his dog's got it. And you can load whatever song you want into it and just tap along with it at different levels. And it's basically Guitar Hero on mobile, right? So you go through all this, and there's banner ads at the top, along the sides, down the bottom, flowing through in the background. If you pay the $2.95 or whatever it is to buy it, so it's ad-free, after every segment, if you'll get an ad run, 2 or 3 ads. Or if you misstep and you make an error and it stops the game that you failed, you got to go back and retry to the previous checkpoint. Guess what? There's an ad while it loads, and a couple of billion downloads, and all of a sudden all this advertising, which is fed by the algorithms from your phone or your tablet, which has already done all that back end work of profiling you for what your buying habit is, so they can charge a premium to the advertisers to be able to do that. And people in the chat and listening to this might think that I'm just talking about something completely unrelated to gaming. Guess what? PlayStation and Nintendo and Xbox have all spent tons and tons of money developing to be able to implement that. at some level in games somewhere. So, and it'll happen just because that's how they're going to make passive income.
Yeah, I mean, Falky, I was thinking about like mobile and everything. Like, I remember I got hooked on Angry Birds for a little bit on mobile.
You guys remember Flappy Bird?
Yes, I remember Flappy Bird.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I tell you, mobile can be addicting. Anyhow,
Short loops. Loops.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to point out to the panel, I threw it in the chat, so that I was wrong. That quote was actually just PS5 owners. Nearly half of PS5 owners in the U.S. also have a Nintendo Switch.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. On that note, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the show. Falky, yeah, we got to. I don't know if you're around this weekend. We got to figure something out, man, because there's a lot I want to discuss with you that's come out of the hearings and stuff. Pick your brain. It's always a great conversation. And again, thank you everyone in the live chat. Appreciate it. And we'll be follow me on Twitter. Give me a follow on Twitter, BRAP_podcast. That way you're alerted when you'll get notifications, like when I post things on Twitter, like when I'm going live. Subscribe to the channel so you also get those notifications. Remember, hit the bell alert too as well, so you're notified when we go live or when we have scheduled content coming up. So on that note, everyone, hey, thank you again. Enjoy playing video games, because ultimately that's what it's all about, having fun. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.